are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how's it going today, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We have a lot to get into today. We have the draft, we have free agency, we have just a whole bunch of stuff. There's a Cam York extension, there's a new CBA. There's a lot to talk about. Before we dive into that, make sure you're following the show on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso, everywhere except Blue Sky, where it is just at Kevin Durso. Another thing I did want to mention off the top here, and I'm doing this kind of right away. We are looking at a little bit of a hiatus here at You Would Think. Um, things get busy. Life is life. Life is doing life things, and we are going to take a little bit of time off here. We don't have a definitive end date on it, but there is a plan to come back at some point. I'm looking at maybe spotting in some shows over the summer here, maybe doing something in the fall. We will return in some form or fashion, but we don't know where, we don't know when. So make sure you're following us on social media, and we'll do our best to keep you updated. That being said, I am going to do some shows over the summer. At least I'm trying to. So I just wanted to throw something out there. If you are interested in being on one of those shows, if you want to come talk some Flyers with me, you message us. We're on Twitter, or we're at YWT Podcast. DMs are open. Shoot us a DM, and maybe I'll invite you on the show, and we'll do something fun over the summer here. So all right. Diving into it, we do actually have some hockey related news here. Dump. We had the NHL draft this past weekend, and the Flyers held the sixth
Well,
overall pick in that draft.
Was it this past weekend? A couple weekends ago.
That's no, it was. It would have been a week and a half ago. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, a couple weekends ago.
Again, that whole life being life thing. So it's about a week and a half
ago. It's hectic.
As we sit here and record on Tuesday night. But Porter Martone became a Philadelphia Flyer with the sixth overall selection in the first round. There was a lot of talk going into the draft about movement up, movement down. Are the Islanders packaging picks to get ahead of the Flyers? Are they trying to? Who are they trying to draft? Are they trying to get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
Turns out not a whole lot happened for the first half of the first round. We will talk about a little bit that happened later, because really the first trade of the draft was the Flyers.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, it was the first trade. When you refer to the first half of the draft, are you talking in terms of pick total, or are you talking about time-wise?
Man, so everyone said, "Oh, it's a decentralized draft. It'll be like, the other leagues where they blow through it real quick." And no. It was the same basic normal NHL draft. They just made it slower and less convenient.
See, and that's a half truth, because day two was the typical, like, we're done day 2, rounds 2 through 7 in 5 hours.
Day 2 was zippy.
Not bad. That's about what it typically is. You start at noon, you go until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the way it typically goes. 7 o'clock till 11:30 at night, or pushing midnight at that point. That was just brutal. And because of the situation the Flyers were in, everybody kind of had to hang on, because, yeah, sure, okay, they have the 6th pick. They make the pick. They trade the other 2 first-round picks to jump up to 12, and that's all well and good that they do that, but they have all these second-round picks that are still available that they could have used to move back into the last, handful of picks in the first round if that's what they wanted to do. So you still were waiting for the possibility that maybe they did something else. So it wasn't like you could just sit there and, don't get me wrong. When they made the trade, my immediate thought kind of was, more or less, oh, wow, they're already done.
Yeah.
This whole night, and we're 12 picks in, and they're done until tomorrow. We'll get to tomorrow. But
Danny saw how long that first round was taking and went, I'm going to bed. or Jonesy saw how long that first round was taking and went, I'm going to the bar.
That's probably more accurate. I don't think Danny didn't even speak to the media, and again, like we said, life being life and things like that. I haven't been to anything for a while at this point. I did not go to anything around Rick Tocchet getting hired. I didn't go to, there was a whole big thing in Atlantic City, for the draft. I did not go to anything with that to cover any of it. And I was not at development camp either. So just a lot of things kind of up in the air, and I wasn't able to make it like I would have liked to. But I know that for everybody who was in Atlantic City, like, Danny didn't speak until right up against the end of the draft. I mean, I think he came out and finally started to speak and address the first round picks when they were at 29th overall, 30th overall, something like that. It was like right up against the end. And
pretty safe assumption that he was probably working phones just to see if there was anything available,
well, because
and
they're still
finally
sitting
kind of
on
ran out of steam.
well, because at that given point in time, they were still sitting on 36.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, who knows what they could do with that pick. So you had no choice but to kind of hang on and wait it out and see where it went, as just all these, in fairness, it did set the table for the second day. I'll say that much, because you were watching as some names didn't come off the board in the first 32, and you're like, that's interesting. Here's somebody who made it to day 2, and here's somebody who made it to day 2, and to be fair, we'll get into it, but I think the Flyers took a few of those guys when it came down to it. That comes into play. But we really just have to start at the top. So let's just start at the top with the 6th overall pick. There he is. There's Porter Martone.
And as a lot of people projected, the draft did start with 5 centers going after, or I'm sorry, 4 centers went right after Matthew Schaefer at number 1 overall.
Right.
Michael Misa, Anton Frandel, Caleb Desnoyers, and Brady Martin, a little bit of a late riser there in a lot of draft boards, were the names off the board when the Flyers picked. I think in the minds of a lot of Flyers fans, myself included, when you're put on the clock and you have Porter Martone there and you have James Higgins there, in my head, given the current needs of the organization, I would be leaning towards James Higgins. Now, that being said, the second Porter Martone got in that weird little interview dome thing and was talking to Danny Briere, I fell in love with the kid. All reservations completely disappeared when the first words out of his mouth were, "I'm so happy I had a Claude Giroux jersey growing up and a Wayne Simmons, Flyer stuff all over my walls."
Right. So, okay, now, and if that's not the part that sold you, then I'm sure seeing some of the clips from development camp helped, because then you see what the ability can be. Like, he's got a lot of talent. I'll do full disclosure here, because when we did the show, the last show, which featured our draft preview, I didn't talk a lot about Porter Martone for good reason, because I genuinely didn't think he was going to be there.
Fair enough. There was a lot of chatter that he was.
At one point in time, I think this was, I mean, what did we do that show? The Tuesday before the draft, I think it was, or something like that. I think I genuinely still, at that given moment, with 72 hours until the draft started, had it Schaefer, Misa, Martone, bunch of centers after that, and go from there. And I'll start with this part, because you brought up the Brady Martin thing. Everybody, and listen, there's people who are going to love what Brady Martin's all about and what his style was and things like that, and I understand that. I think a lot of people should be sending the Nashville Predators a thank you card for taking Brady Martin off the board and potentially putting it into the Flyers' hands that you had possibly top line this, top line that. Like, you really set them up for like Brady Martin was not, wouldn't have been on my top 5 list if I was, Now, like, here's the thing. I do my draft preview. I told you I had 5 targets, and Brady Martin was one of them, because all the signs are pointing towards they're interested in him. So I'm going to include him. And I'm going to tell you what happened about 24 hours before the draft, so full context with that. 24 hours before the draft begins, meaning it's the night before. I'm working on the preview to put it up the next morning. This is 11th hour changes for me then. Martone makes it onto my 5 targets list. And Frandel came off, because now all of a sudden the way that it sounded was Frondel's not going past 3.
Frandel ain't going on. No. And even if he somehow gets past 3, there's no way he was getting past Utah at 4.
So, and look, Frandel was on my list of 4, because I wiped Schaefer and Misa out of the picture right away. They're going 1-2. Don't think about it.
Although, honestly, in the days leading up to the draft, there was
some talk about Frandel and Misa switching places.
Misa starting to slide a little bit, right? But it didn't happen. It's not important now, right?
Right. So, but that was the thing. It really, like, there was no chaos between 1 and 2. Like, we didn't do anything with that. So, okay, fine. Frandel goes 3. Now it's going to get really interesting, because now we're down to who's the guy that matters most in this picture? Is it Desnoyers? Is it Hagens? Is it, maybe it is Martone because he's still there? Is it Jake O'Brien? Is it Brady Martin? Desnoyers comes off 4. And I was surprised for a second. Like, Desnoyers is definitely the guy you pick somewhere in that range. But I was surprised for a second because Utah was the team that everybody said was infatuated with Brady Martin. And then they didn't pick him. They went with Desnoyers instead. And it's like, okay, that's interesting because now actually at that point in time,
personally.
But in my head, right at that moment, Brady Martin, it's get yourself ready. Brady Martin's going to be a flyer. This is where it's shaping up to go. They're going to have somebody. Maybe Martone goes to Nashville. Maybe, maybe they do jump and take Hagens. But somebody's going to be on the board like a Hagens or Martone, and O'Brien's going to be there, and Brady Martin's going to be there, and it's going to be Brady Martin because that's just what they're going to do, right? At least when they called out, among that list, well, Martin comes off the board. So now you're feeling way better because it's like, okay, now it's Martone, Hagens, O'Brien. It probably shouldn't be O'Brien at this point because, hello, the other 2 guys were top 5 everywhere, it felt like.
And a year ago, were at least Hagens was top 3, top 2 on a lot of lists.
A year ago, Hagens was top 2, and Martone was probably still top 5 at the time. There was just a whole bunch of shuffling that went on, and somehow still kind of collectively averaged him out to be 3 when it came down to it.
Right.
So, and I'm with you. Like, in your head, you're going, well, Hagens is the center. It's got to be the center. But you don't draft for need. And draft for positional need. You draft best player available. And by the end of the week, or by that point in the week, once you got up against it, if you looked at all the ranking systems, the best player available on most of the lists at that time was Martone. And they took him. And you kind of, there was a little bit of an element of just do it and figure it out tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's another winger. We'll figure it out tomorrow, because like it was really funny that's like somebody tried to jump in on Twitter X like the day after, and this is like also reflective of like in addition to who they picked day 2 and all that stuff, that it was such an emphasis on, again, we'll get to it, but obviously there was an emphasis on size. We'll get into it.
I was about to mention that. Yep.
But it was and they don't get any skill guys. And I just shot over Martone's stat line and went, is 37 goals and 98 points in 57 games as an 18-year-old good?
Right.
Is that not skilled? Go watch the highlight tape. Look at the way that this guy shoots the puck. Like, like we highlighted a lot. Frondell, Frondel's got the shot, right? Like, look at the shot he's got. This is like the next best one in the draft. If really not the best, like it's right up there because he's deceiving with it. He knows how to position the puck to set it up for that release and to make it look deceptive, make it go where he wants it to go. And look, I keep coming back to, with Martone in particular, what was the last thing he did before the draft, game wise? The last exposure he would have had before the draft, he got pulled onto World Championships on Team Canada. And the obvious thing to point out is played alongside Crosby, played alongside McKinnon. Yeah, the superstars. And I just keep coming back to, and alongside Travis Konechny and Travis Sanheim and Tyson Forster. Like they basically got a direct scouting report, not just from the scouts that they send to World Championships, but from 3 of their own players
who were in the room with them. Yeah.
And like, can we point something else out, by the way, about the, because it's in the picture on the graphic. What's that?
Is it the fact that he's wearing the C on that Brampton jersey?
No, exactly. Because how many 18-year-olds get that? It goes both ways, right? Like, remember the conversation we had not too long ago about Denver Barkey being the captain of the London Knights, and it's like, if you're the captain of the London Knights among other talented players and you're on your way to winning a Memorial Cup, you must be something special. Right. You must be something special in the room that people think that much of you, that you're the one that they want to be the captain on, like this super team in juniors, right? It's the same thing for it's kind of the same thing for being an 18-year-old, not attached to an NHL team yet, and we're still going to slap the C on you anyway because you're that much of a leader.
And you do obviously get a little bit more of that as you get to some of the smaller juniors teams. Like Brampton isn't necessarily one of the biggest power
Right.
hitters in the
Sure.
OHL. You know, a lot of some of those smaller CHL teams have a little bit of that. The best player is the captain thing that like a lot
Yeah.
of youth teams have. So that might have been a little bit of the case here, but
I
still, you
mean,
love to see that he's wearing the C.
he turned out to be the best player on his team too. Don't get me wrong, but
You love the fact that he's 6'3", 205, and grew up worshiping at the altar of Wayne Simmons. Right. I mean, I'm sure by now everyone listening to this podcast has seen both the original childhood picture and
Mhm.
the updated picture of Porter Martone with Wayne Simmons. It's freaking adorable.
Yeah,
Ugh.
and all of a sudden you look at the two pictures, you blink, and he's the same size as Wayne Simmons.
Crazy. And I imagine, given that's a guy that he has shown a lot of affection towards,
Mhm.
given his size, given the fact that he's on the wing, I think it's safe to say that Porter Martone will play some amount of that kind of game.
Do you mean that being compared, like the first name that comes out of people's mouths when you compare him to anybody is Matthew Tkachuk, that doesn't light your fire a little bit in terms of what
Sorry,
he could be?
I'm sorry. Are you talking about two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Matthew
Yeah.
Tkachuk? Oh, okay. I'm just checking to make sure we're talking about the same guy. The guy who brought 2 rings to his town? Okay.
The guy who on the second one played through what he did and basically was
On the first
almost incapable of
yeah.
moving essentially, and then still, still
Y
scored the game-winning goal in the cup clincher.
To me, nothing will beat what he was playing through in the Vegas series, though. The
Oh, the
fractured
sternum.
sternum.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, how about playing hockey with anyway. Yes. So Porter Martone is 6'3", 205. As we will see kind of throughout the rest of these draft picks here, there was definitely okay. I'm not going to say that the Flyers chose large players because they were large.
Right.
But in a situation where there may be a couple of players that you're looking at in a certain spot, they
Right.
tended to pick the biggest one of that bunch.
Sure. So I think at this point we're going to shift from Porter Martone to
Absolutely.
Jack
Love Porter
Nesbitt.
Martone. Love Porter Martone. Hope he makes the roster this year. It's a possibility again, especially with the Tyson Forrester injury. We'll talk about that.
Well, that's true. We should mention that as well. The Tyson Forrester injury when it comes time to really talk about the construction of the roster. Once we're past all the, like probably into the free agency section
Yeah.
more, but
That may provide Porter Martone an
well,
opportunity to impress in camp.
it's going to provide it probably provides an opportunity. I'm going to be the opposite of you. And listen, if he does make the team out of camp, it's exciting. Don't get me wrong. I hope he doesn't.
I get it. I get
I
why you
think
don't.
for his I'm telling you right now, I have him already. I don't even know if I have him penciled in. I think I have him written in ink on the 26-27 opening night roster. That's how good I think he's going
Okay.
to, or how quickly he'll be there. But he just needs one more year. And like, we're going to get into it. I think we all know, we know the ideal competition he should play
Right. Well,
location wise to
I
be
was
determined by himself, obviously, if that's the decision that he makes. But I think we all have a place now that people would like to see him play.
of course. Well, I was about to say, like, is it crazy? Is it crazy to say that I'd rather, if the only two options were the NHL and the OHL, I'd rather see him in the NHL at this point.
Oh, I think he's close to being an OHL graduate, if not already.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't think there's a whole lot of value when it comes to his development to go send him back to dominate 15 and 16-year-olds for another year. Like, I just
No,
don't think it
no,
makes a whole lot of sense.
that's why I'm saying there's an ideal competition level he should play next year. That isn't
Sure.
necessarily the NHL, but it is not the OHL.
And
There's an in between option that's available for him that I think he should utilize.
well, and let's just talk about it. It is freshly available because this is
Sure, it's
new
new.
under right. This is new under the athlete identity rules and all of that stuff, and that's the NCAA.
Right.
And the door has now been opened for players to move to the from the CHL to
Yeah. I don't want to get
college.
in. I don't
And
want. I'm gonna bury. We're gonna bury the lead, and I'm not gonna tell you where I think he should play. People can probably figure it out already. If you unless you've been living under a rock. You know where it is.
Anyway,
But we'll get there. Because I will make mention of that later. But that's to me, that's the ideal path. I would 1 year, just do 1 year like that, and then I'll seriously, we'll see in 26, 27.
Absolutely. Now, another guy that I think should go back to the OHL is the number 12 selection here
he's
on the
almost
screen.
guaranteed to at this point. Yes.
Well, I just mean even over a going to the NCAA like we're looking at out of Porter Martone. I think Jack Nesbitt, the player the Flyers selected with the 12th pick in the first round here, I think that is a player who could do with another year in the OHL, another year of seasoning. Windsor is a solid middle to top tier organization as far as the OHL goes. Like, they're no London Knights, but they're a pretty hefty organization.
No, they've got the name recognition for sure.
So I think that will be a good opportunity. He's 6'5". He's 185 pounds. So it's obviously a little bit on the slimmer side. I imagine.
And he's still kind of an underager to a degree. Like there's
one of the younger ones in the class.
Right. There's not just that. There's teammates on his roster that are going to see more playing time because they're more experienced. That's how this works. He will become that. They've pretty much already kind of made it clear. You're talking about next year. They've made it pretty clear it's going to be 2 years of OHL. And then we'll see from there. And he's probably going to need a pro season just to adjust. So because he's far from a finished product, and that's what people don't like about the 12 part.
Yeah,
because we kind of need to set the stage for this. They traded 22 and 31 to move up to 12. Everybody kind of had. I don't want to say everybody, because I think there was a bunch of directions you could go. A lot of people weren't like. Center wasn't your first thought because you didn't really know which center you were trading up for in that spot. If you looked at it, like in your mind, if there was a center to trade up for in the 10 to 13 range, like they ended up, the answer for you would have been based on our last show was Roger McQueen. But he was gone by 10, and there was no getting to 10.
He was already in a helicopter halfway to Disney World, by Disneyland.
Sure,
because that was crazy.
By the way, the single best marketing play of the entire draft, to immediately
put him on a plane and whisk him off to Disneyland after the Mighty Ducks introduce him.
Right, the Mighty Ducks come in from the two original cast members, including freaking Charlie Conway. Right, like
absolutely
comes in. They introduce the pick. They announced the pick, I should say. He puts on a Ducks jersey. You're in California already, so yes, the helicopter ride to Disneyland is a given.
Hilarious.
His last name is freaking McQueen, so you just send him right over to Carsland and say, "Here's another McQueen. You're standing next to the car."
I believe they've already confirmed that he's going to wear jersey number 95.
And then you slap number 95 on the back of him and sell a lot of jerseys, and that's how you do business.
Do you mean to imply that the team once owned, operated, and run by Disney World might be good at some marketing? Hello?
Sure, but look, there was no given that he was going to be the pick.
No, and it's
but it just makes too much sense, does it? Not like, come on.
Man, I heard people talking about Roger McQueen at like 8 or 9. 7. Like, there were people when the Boston Bruins are on the clock. There were people going, "Oh, well, do you take McQueen or Hagen's here?"
Yeah, I know, right?
Hello.
So you know what's funny is that ironically enough, the Flyers somehow, because you asked me multiple times on the last show if there was any way they could get into the territory, and ironically enough, this was the number I gave you.
Territory.
No, this was the number I gave you for McQueen. I said, I bet you he's gone by 12. And he was going by 12, but a little earlier than would have gotten you there. And
he was by 12.
And every time I talk about Jack Nesbitt, by the way, I come into this and I go, we got to I want to preface this. I do like the player. I don't not like the player. I do like the player. It felt like a little bit of a stretch at a time because I had him on my 10 targets at 22 and 31. Now, granted, if you believe he's going to be a center for the long haul, even if that caps out at second line center is like the highest of his ceiling, I believe.
More than likely,
third line is is like much more of a realistic expectation.
You'd probably rather have him on your third line with a good roster type of situation. Yeah.
Sure. And that doesn't scream 12th overall pick. I get it. The thing about so many centers had already gone, including McQueen at that point, on top of O'Brien was picked, Higgins goes. We talked already about Brady Martin, Frondell, Desnoyers, Misa. Now, I just rattled off, by the way. So what was that? 7 centers taken in the first 11 picks, and 11 was Ben Kindle, who is
And
kind of
Kendall.
a little bit of both, right? Like you
Yep.
pretty much just call him a forward and you slap him at any position you want to in the lineup.
So he'll be a winger in the NHL. Got it.
That's the way. Well, that's what I feel, but that's exactly
Right.
the question. I don't think it's a stretch for me to look at the lists of draft picks and say Jack Nesbitt is a top 10 center in this draft if you consider the guys that people in hockey circles are going to say he'll actually
They're going to get
stay
pushed to
there.
wing. Yeah.
Right. Like, isn't there a world where Meese is a smaller guy? Isn't there a world where he's better on the wing when it comes down to it? Possibly.
I get it, but I think he is probably the exception on that
He
one.
might be the exception. I can see.
If you had picked any other name, I'm with you.
Well, right. Like
Michael Meese is really good.
Well, no, but guess what? This is where I come back to the Martone Higgins decision. I think they think that about Higgins.
Okay.
Like, what you're saying when you pass on Higgins there is we either don't think he's a top line center and he's a 2 at best, or he's a top line player, but we don't think he's going to stick at center. So we're in the same position either way. Take the taller guy.
Well, and I have to say, Higgins to Boston is so good. He is such a Bruin, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you know how the Bruins always keep finding Bruins?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you know what's interesting with him specifically? I don't know what to like. Don't ask me to predict where he's playing when the time comes.
Okay.
Boston College, making it on the Bruins roster. Don't ask me to pick.
I think he goes to Boston. I think he goes back to Boston College. I think he's for a couple of years.
I would have him play one more season at BC, and then you sign the contract and we go from there. That's
maybe
just
even
me.
2, maybe even 2, but that kind of depends on what your Bruins roster looks like at that point. Like
for 1 and 2, I would say you also have to remember that if you think he's as good as you hope he is, and that he's one of your solutions to being a top liner, you kind of sometimes have to cater to those players and be like, it is your decision. If you feel like you're ready to sign with us, we're ready to have you. Now, look, it's up to the team at that point, whether or not he actually plays on the NHL roster or goes to the minors.
Or you can trade him to the Ducks for Jamie Drysdale.
Or that too. And you've got to be, and that's the thing, right? Don't you have to be careful is not the right word there, but you do have to cater to the player a little bit. And that's why I think he's got one more year at BC and it's over. Like, he's going pro. You don't get told you're the top prospect in the draft for however long. Get placed on all these different, all over the place. Your name is connected. You might as well have a hyphen in your last name and be James Hagen Toby Baker, because that's what everybody said for half the year. And then be at the top of the draft like that and be in a position to be part of everything going forward, to be one of these top end players, that everybody talks about. You kind of feel like you're ready for things like that. Like, you don't think that Martone doesn't feel the way that he does and is thinking about making an NHL roster right away because he, just because it's part of it's because you played in world championships. You're playing alongside of the guys. You're looking around at the names in that locker room and going, if I feel like I could hold my own here, I got to do some more work, but who's to say I couldn't do it with everybody else on a team that picked 6th overall? And that's what you think about.
And you do just have to have some amount of confidence to be an athlete of this caliber anyway.
Oh yeah.
You just have to be an inherently very confident person.
Sure. And the thing with, again, like the problem with the 2 picks, because Higgins felt like it was obviously a need and the idea that he might, a lot of people, I think if you're from the outside and you're just watching what you think James Higgins is, like, this is where I come from with this team's internal thoughts and who sticks at center and all that. If teams don't think that and have watched those players constantly, that's their opinion. But I think a lot of the outside perspective is, how you passed on him for what? He's a center. Don't you need centers? And in their mind, they might be thinking, not quite as much as you think, or whatever. And I keep thinking, if it was reversed, right? Like, if you picked Higgins at 6, still make the trade up to 12, and now pick a defenseman or a winger, are people viewing it the same way as, well, they took a project at center, so they still don't have and I agree with this part. They still don't have a number 1 center. Like, I get it.
Right. Like we're talking about Nesbitt being at least 2 to 3 years away from capping out at a 2C. So like we're not talking
At
about,
best.
well, that's what I mean, right? Like we're talking about him 2 or 3 years away from cracking the lineup, and then his ceiling is
Right.
at 2C.
Sure.
So it's not exactly a big, swing big strikeout home run type of pick.
Correct.
But it's a bit of a project. It's okay. So it's the kind of pick that a lot of GMs don't get to see the result of. Because most GMs just don't have their job for 3, 4, 5 years to see a project like this really play out.
You know who else doesn't have their jobs for 3 or 4 years like that to usually see this play out? Head coaches.
Well, right. And that's why you don't draft for your head coaches and, all of that. But I like Nesbitt in the same way, or not in the same way, it's a little bit different, in a similar way to how I liked Jay O'Brien. He's a guy. They got him. I like what I see. Let's see if it turns into anything. And then you're kind of you're depositing it into the bank, letting Jack Nesbitt gather interest for a couple of years, and then withdraw and see what we got.
Well, and look, go back to the same thing, like I said with Martone. Watch some of the clips that came out from development camp. The upside is there. You can see it with him. The upside's there. It's just got to be molded better. The skating has to improve. For a guy who's 6'5", he's built pretty good. He might be that 185 might be a little deceptive.
A little slim, but he's
no. I'm saying it might be a little deceptive. He might be a little more than that, and that's just what the draft information had him listed as. Like,
well, and I assume he's filling out and bulking up. Like, as someone, and I think I said this on draft night in our group text here, as someone who is roughly that height. When I was 18 years old, my stat line looked a lot like Jack Nesbitt's, honestly. There's a real chance he's not done growing. There might be an extra inch or two there. There is very probably an extra 20 or 30 pounds there if he works and puts that on. Jack Nesbitt could be a real sturdy, solid, big player. Like the fact that he's 185 right now at the moment of his draft, there's a long development ahead.
Oh, you're looking at a future. You're trying to look at a future where that number's not 185. It's 215, 220.
You would love to see him at 6'7", 215 even in 2 or 3 years here, because there is a chance. Again, as someone who did this, there is a chance when you're that kind of height that you grow into your early 20s. Like I grew a half inch at 21, so it's certainly not over for him as far as growth goes necessarily. But I also assume that he will be putting on weight and doing it the correct, responsible way.
So let's go on to day 2 and start to get all these other picks.
These picks.
All of these. Well, there's some we're not going to touch on as much as others. I will say that. But
we started with a trade. With the Flyers did do a little bit of shuffling with Seattle.
Now, before we jump into the individuals, I do want to just say something about the grouping in general, because there's something in here that is nowhere to be found.
There are no goalies.
Yeah, and that was surprising to me with the amount of picks they had, especially when they made the trade that they did to start, as you were alluding to, which, by the way, this is the type of stuff like, okay, if you weren't as big of a fan of 22 and 31 for 12 and then the player's a project, this is the type of trade that gives me more confidence in Danny Briere to do things, to be creative's not even the right word, because I don't think you needed to be overly creative with this. It's just savvy to do it. It shows you've got the skill set to be a GM. To take 36, drop 2 spots, get another second round pick by moving up from the third round.
68 to 57.
When quite literally, I mean, what were we? A day or two, or maybe it was a little more than that when we had done the last show, but you're literally going from earlier in the week or a week before the draft or whatever it was. You made a trade that took away one of the second round picks for good reason with what you got, but you made a trade that took away one of those picks. So you're now down to 3 in that round. So it was 3 in the first, 3 in the second. So you're only going to have 6 now, not 7. And then you made the trade on night 1 and it's like, oh, now we're only going to have 5, not 6. And another thing that I'm surprised about, because you asked me on the previous show, you put an over under on it, the number of picks they made in the first 2 rounds. And you gave me 4.5 as the line. And I told you right at that given moment, I was thinking 5. And sure enough, after night 1, you were lined up to have 5. And then Danny Briere snuck this one in and goes, okay, never mind. I'm getting back into the second round and I'm keeping all my picks. And
man, and not only does he get back into the second round, I really like Matthew Guard. We'll talk about him.
We'll get there. I want to start at the top with the 38th overall pick, and we'll work our way up, because this one's not a surprise at all. We talked about this guy. We talked about this guy. I mean, how can you ignore what those 2 numbers say?
Right. And
the
you're not talking
34.
Right. You're not talking about the 0 goals. You're not talking about the 3 assists. You are talking about the fact that he is 6'6", 234 pounds.
And it's a shame that nobody got to see him and see him participate. He's not just that. I meant at development camp too, that he's still recovering from that, so you don't get the chance to see him. But that look, don't get me wrong, that 13 is important, that he didn't get the chance to play. That's probably the only reason you got him where you did. Like, got him where you did and didn't at the same time, because we're gonna get into the other picks. I kind of think you could have reversed the order of all 3 of these guys to start the second round, and I would have understood the order.
And for people that are watching on our YouTube channel, or for people that aren't watching on our YouTube channel, we haven't actually said the name yet. I want you to do it, because I'm not Italian enough for it.
Oh, Carter Amico.
Okay. I didn't know if it was Amico or Amico or what the deal was. Okay. So Porter Martone will be joining the Flyers eventually. He was chosen in the second round, 38th overall. He is a defenseman, as previously mentioned. He is 6'6", 234 pounds. American kid, came up from the U.S. National Development Team, which has had a good resume in the last couple of years.
Yeah. By the way, get ready. You're going to notice a trend in a couple minutes. That U.S. National Development Team and all that stuff like that. You're gonna get. There's gonna be a trend here. What? By the way, and if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you might be able to see it. It's not abundantly clear in this particular picture, but it's noticeable enough. He's right-handed.
See, I thought you were going to mention the fact that we have yet another player that the Flyers have chosen in the draft with a leadership letter on his jersey.
That's true. I wasn't really going there. No, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right-handed defensemen are incredibly coveted, and now to throw in all the other intangibles here that are, oh, by the way, 6'6", 234, just a giant, right? Like, and he's on the right side. Okay, I don't care. I don't care if he doesn't even come close to working out to the way that you think he might. He would be a tradable player no matter what.
Exactly, and that is the sort of breakout home run pick that I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier. Like, there is a real chance. There is a timeline, and I don't know if it's the timeline we live in, but there is a timeline where Carter Amico wins 3 Norris trophies and makes $15-20 million a season in 10 years. Like that, there is a timeline where that happens, and I don't know if we're living in that timeline. But a guy that big with the skill set he has, and stop me if you've heard this before, because I spent the first 3 years of this show talking about Sam Moran. But if he can put it all together, man, he could be a good player.
Sure.
Yep.
And I think I go back to, it was like, I don't remember exactly when I started writing down names for the draft, like think about who I was putting in previews and things like that. Carter Amico is on my day 2 list practically from the beginning for exactly the same reasons that the Flyers picked him, because I'm sitting there looking and I'm like, they don't have big defensemen, at least not actively at the NHL level. I mean, pretty much the biggest guy they've got is either Travis Sanheim, not as physical, or Rasmus Ristolainen.
At
when
least
healthy.
until Hunter McDonald makes the roster.
I think you're gonna wait a little bit on that
I
one.
know.
But I saw all this information on and the range that people had him going, and it was always right around a Flyers pick in the second round. And I'm like,
Well, it turns out when you have picks all over the
right.
round,
This is a day two, but immediately I'm like, this is a day 2 pick, and it's exactly the type of player I can see them going for. And sure enough, they just jumped and went right into it. So there you go with that one. By the way, I will do my best to be your pronunciation guide during the course of this, if you need me to, because because the next one we're gonna have to do, because there's a way that we've already said it wrong on a previous show, so we'll get it right this time.
Okay, then I will definitely let you do it.
Okay, so let's just jump ahead. Here we go. This is the next one. This is 42 picks later.
The Flyers finally draft a normal-sized person.
Sort of. He's still bigger. He's still 6'1".
Yeah, but not in the NHL. That's a normal-sized NHLer. Let's be honest.
Oh, I'm agreeing with you that it's a normal-sized NHL, but it's still a big guy. This, by the way, is Jack Murtagh.
Stop.
Yes.
Stop. Listen, I know that we all have the right to decide how our name is pronounced. Not you. You're wrong. It's Murtagh. Fight me. Anyway, he probably will fight me and he would win, because it turns out he's about to be a professional athlete. But Jack Murtagh,
this kid's got skill, by the way. This kid's got skill, by the way.
Yeah, U.S. National Development Team program, like you were saying. He's listed on our graphic here as a center/left winger, which certainly leads me to think that he'll be a center or be a winger at the NHL level, because that is kind of the default thinking. But you never know. Maybe he turns into like a Scott Lawton-y winger, where like he can play center and can take face-off. So it's fine.
We're gonna so for what it's worth, by the way, because yes, at least at this present moment, or from when he last played a game, let's just call it U.S. National Development Team program. Do you know what Jack Murtagh and Carter Amico have in common?
Are they both going to Boston University?
They both are going to Boston University.
Okay. Oh, they get to play James Hagens a bunch this year.
But like, not just like right away. You like when you get to be able to put guys like these guys are going to be teammates now. Teammates on one of the elite programs in college hockey. We've all known that, which, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we're going to kind of somewhat, like, I'm not trying to take away from each one of these second rounders time, but we're trying to keep this moving, because we're not even at the rest of the offseason yet. So we still have a lot more stuff to get to. He's going to have a lot of skill. There was, again, some footage of him, and he's got a really good shot. So, like, he's the guy that you take in the second round. You look at those numbers: 56 games, 22 goals, 31 assists, 53 points. All right, you're not quite point per game. That's kind of how you end up being a second round pick, but that's also the guy who goes to college and as a freshman puts up numbers that are a lot better than you expect. Or honestly, maybe he doesn't in the beginning, because of the fact that he's going to go up against a lot different competition.
Right.
That might be a bigger adjustment for him than others, let's just say. If we're referring to others, by the way, guys like this.
Yeah, you're going to need to hit me with this one. I know how the name Shane is pronounced.
Yes. This is Shane Vansagi.
Okay, that's what I would have said. If you had asked me to guess, that's what I would have guessed. But
picked with the 48th overall pick, which, by the way, this is what I mean by this. This is not a knock on Carter Amico by any stretch, but I think Carter Amico, given the injury and all stuff like that, could have been there at 48 also. This is the guy I would not have expected to be there at 48, who I would have jumped at 38. Like you could have made the case with Murtagh that he could have gone 30 and he went 40.
Right.
Guess what? You could have done the same thing with Vansagi.
Absolutely.
That he could have gone 30 and he went 48. So the value here is just great. Now, this is what I'm talking about. Look at that stat line.
Well, right. And this is where the strength of schedule and the league you're playing in
Mhm.
matters when it comes to draft evaluation, because we're talking about a right winger, 6'2", 216. At the size the age he is, you would assume that he was pretty dominant.
Mhm.
37 games played, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. It looks pretty underwhelming, but again, that's the NCAA for you. If
And
you can find a point per game player, especially pre-draft year,
well, and
that's a good player.
well, and consider some of his teammates on Michigan State last year. One of them participated in the camp with him because he was already here. That was Carson Dorwart. Another one was Isaac Howard, who could very well be on the move, by the way, because he's not signing in Tampa, but you get the point. Those are the guys who get the ice time. Not, not the freshman who just came in and, whatever. But
who, by the way, looks completely unhinged in the photo you've chosen. Those are some crazy eyes in this graphic. Like if you're watching on our YouTube channel, look at that man's eyes.
Did you see the hit that he laid in the one, like,
yeah,
this dude's a tank. They were calling him Truck, but this dude's a tank.
Yeah. We talked about the fact that the Flyers draft strategy seemed to be size-based, and at 6'2", 216, he's definitely big, but he's not an enormous hulking monster like some of these guys are. But he plays like it. He plays big.
Yeah,
and that's going to be huge. Like Keith Jones and Danny Briere really said, let's put the bullies back together.
But like, here's a perfect example. Do you remember what name, when we were talking about Brady Martin being possibly the pick at 6 for the Flyers? Do you remember what comparison I gave you?
No.
I gave you, I know that I gave you Sam Bennett, which was kind of the higher upside if like the offense is there. But I gave you, and that's not to say the other name I said doesn't have offense ability, but the other name I gave you was Tom Wilson.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Meet your Tom Wilson. Because that's how he plays. And now you think about it. Instead of saying that you pick that guy in the top 10 where you usually get the skill guys, you got a mid-second round.
Right. If Shane Van Sage turns into 70% of Porter Martone, you're thrilled. You're thrilled.
Like, and there's a part of me that also wants to do this kind of to a degree, because it's, think about where they got all these picks from. Okay, you traded back with Seattle and went from 36 to 38. That was still your pick. So that's still your pick that you use on Carter and Mikko. You drafted Jack Murtagh, 40th. That's Anaheim's pick.
That's the Drysdale Cutter Gauthier.
That's the Cutter Gauthier. That's your Cutter Gauthier pick.
Okay.
This pick at 48 is courtesy of Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost from Calgary.
Yeah, this is Danny Briere's draft. Like these are picks that he acquired. We talked about 6 picks in the first 2 rounds. This class, no matter what happens with Danny Briere, right? Because obviously this is his first GM job in the NHL. I assume he expects to have more than one, because that's how it goes once you're in the club. If you get fired from one job, you bounce around to another. This class, no matter how his tenure with the Flyer goes, this will be the initial impression of who Danny Briere is. How this draft class comes out will define at least the early portion of Danny Briere's GMing career.
And to your point, and this is a little bit of a baseball tie to it, or a baseball comparison, but there's always a guy who builds the foundation. There's a guy who is there to get it across the finish line. And then there's sometimes the guy who just kind of inherits the goods and then is there for the fallout. When the Phillies won a World Series, more than half of that team was Ed Wade's. He's not there to get the credit. But he's
an Ed Wade reference in 2025.
Holy. I hear you. But you brought in Pat Gillick to be the guy who gets across the finish line. And when they make it to the World Series again the next year in 2009, and your GM is not Pat Gillick anymore because he's retired, and it's Ruben Amaro Jr., who just by being part of that front office structure, you got all of this stuff in its prime.
You sure did.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. Like, where the reason I'm bringing that up is this could be a group that wins something. I don't know if Danny Briere is the guy who's there to see it happen. Sometimes that's not how it works.
And that's what I mean about, right?
Yes.
Like, so even if Danny Briere gets fired in 2 years, if the Flyers win a cup 2 years after that, and the core features 3 or 4 guys from this draft class, then that's Danny Briere's legacy with a green check mark on it.
Right.
So,
like you got to like a perfect example also, and they didn't win the year that we're going to talk about, or the year that I'm going to bring up, but Paul Holmgren's the GM of the team in 2010.
Oh yeah, that team didn't lose. That series is still going on. What are you talking about? There was no goal. I don't. That puck never went in.
Yeah. Okay, and this is just completely off the cuff because I saw this earlier.
Okay.
Michael Layton is the goaltending coach in Detroit now, where
Insane.
Patrick Kane happens to play.
That hurts.
So talk about that encounter.
Oh, that hurts so bad.
What? How's that conversation go?
Well, how do you look at that dude? He's still playing at 65 years old with a new hip. How do you look at that dude and say anything other than, all right?
Right. The point I was going to make, and this is maybe not as good, like, I don't say not as good, but like he had put together some good teams before this, so it's not like it was a guy who like people didn't think could construct a team, and it was like, oh yeah, by the way, you drafted half of a championship roster, you just weren't there when they won. Exactly. Who drafted Mike Richards and Jeff Carter in 2003? That's still Clark. So a good chunk of the team. I mean, when you're watching that 2010 team, it's not just Carter, Richards, that group that was probably drafted pre-lockout. It's Simone Gagne's on that roster in 2010. Bob Clark's the guy who gets up there and doesn't remember who the pick is when they say Claude Giroux.
Oh,
you know what I mean? He's on that team. It's still, the foundation is still built by somebody else sometimes. And Clark was still obviously present. It's just he was not the general manager. That's all. Okay. Beside the point, let's get back to these picks in Danny Briere's class, because that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, and
you wanted to go to this guy because you really want to talk about this guy.
Absolutely, yes. I was gonna say, so the Flyers had one more pick in the second round. It's this pick we're about to talk about here. After that, they had some picks in the 5th, some picks in the 6th. Those are guys that you look at a little more as lottery tickets. Like, that's a scratch off.
Yeah.
If it comes back and turns into a player in 3 or 4 years, awesome.
I mean, there's an element where late second even becomes that.
Sure, but scouting.
It's a little more calculated. Yeah, it's a little more calculated.
Scouting is so good nowadays that most lists are pretty converged on the top 75 to 100, roughly. And exactly where they fall obviously varies wildly, but we kind of coalesce on 2.5 rounds of guys. And the last guy in this draft class that may or may not end up being Danny Briere's kind of resume, the last name in those first 2 rounds in what I would call some of the prime positions to be NHL players at some point is Matthew Gard, taken in the second round, 57th overall. Danny and Keith got away from the big guys thing for a couple of picks there, and they are right back to it because Matthew Gard is at least 6'4", 192.
See,
and again, I think he's going to end up bigger than that. Like, I think he shows up to training camp at least 10 pounds heavier, 5 or 6 pounds heavier.
He's going to have to at some point, because right now he's just tall, lanky, forward at this point. See, and like you're talking like the last 2 picks at 6'1" and 6'2" are like not that big.
Listen, they're not small.
No, it was, to me, that's the point. It was telling they didn't hand you any. Here's a 5'10" guy. You know what I mean? This was 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" in Martone, 6'4" with Gard, 6'5" with, like, they gave you one of everything. 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". Straight up the list, and like, now I know that the numbers here don't look outstanding. They're pretty darn good when you realize he was the leading scorer on Red Deer's roster.
Right. Well, we've talked a little bit about in this show about some of the inequity in how
Mhm.
CHL teams are balanced, and the WHL is already probably the poorest of the
Yeah,
leagues as far as the talent that comes out of there. And
certainly,
Red,
certainly, kind of from
and
an offensive standpoint, like the OHL numbers don't compare to some of these.
no. And then even within the WHL, Red Deer is not exactly on the tippy top of the programs out there. And so you have a guy. This is a little bit more of that best player on a bad team situation
Sure.
where as far as the points go, maybe some of it somebody's got to score. But you watch this kid play, and he is putting things together at a higher level than a lot of his teammates. And he is playing the game at a really strong level. And
Mhm.
of the six names here that we've talked about in the first two rounds, I think he might be the biggest kind of boomer bust of the bunch.
So to me, he's the I don't want to say the least of the group because not just because he's the last one, but okay. When I do these types of things, I normally don't have I don't have a great success rate once we get past like the first guy taken. Usually. You know what I mean? Like I can pretty well forecast the guys who I think they're looking at in the top 10 or in the top 15. Usually I can do a decent job with that. We get to day 2 and I put together a list of like here's the best guys available, and then you have to remind yourself that like, oh yeah, by the way, they pick like 46th or something because that's where they legitimately finished. And in picks 33 to 44, every name that I put down on the day 2 list is gone because they were the top of the top, right away. So as I'm sitting here watching day 2 progress, and they go, okay, here's the pick, and like this is each time through Carter Amico, and I look and I go, had that guy written down. Okay, that was kind of saw that as a possibility. Jack Murtagh, yeah, had that name down at some point. Shane Van Sagi, not only did I have the name down for day 2, I had it down for day 1.
Please.
So I'm sitting there looking at that going, they've called 3 names so far, and all 3 of them were guys that I'm sitting there going, and maybe it was easier to do this again. It's volume. They had all these picks at the front half of the second round. It's like guys who didn't go in the first round are going to be there. You're going to have a shot, but you don't know what they're thinking. This is the point. Like for all the times that kept being repeated, like I think it was at the draft party. And I'm trying to remember if it was that Jason Martinez did like a combo. I'm at the Flyers official party because I like do the Flyers Daily podcast and all that stuff, but I'm also part of the fanatic for this particular broadcast again because they're at it as well, so the radio station's there and all stuff like that. And they had Briere sit down like right before the draft actually kicked off or whatever, and he once again says we're going best player available at 6, blah blah blah, and things like that. And I really quickly threw out there like as a public service announcement, your idea of best player available based on all of these lists that you've seen from you name it, there's a list, there's a mock, there's a ranking system. Their version of best player available is not necessarily the same as what you've read. So be
Absolutely.
prepared for them to take somebody else that, that just that's all it was. And that's what surprised me about day 2 was like all these guys that seemed like the best available going into day 2, they're like, yeah, we agree. These 3,
Right.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's the thing. So this was the first guy that I was on there that I'm like, okay, yeah, I got to actually look this guy up and see what Matthew Guard is all about. And you know what? Once you've made 3 picks that you feel like are really good value plays, he kind of went in the territory where a lot of people expected. I think his rankings were like 53-ish in most of those cases. That's fine. That's fine to do that at 57 and be like, yeah, sure, let's take a shot at that.
Absolutely. Low downside, potentially a high upside because I do like the skill set. I think he's a little bit further away than a lot of the guys we're talking about here. Um, if we talked about 2 more years in the OHL and at least one in the AHL for a Jack Nesbitt, I'm looking at that plus probably at least another year or two for Matthew Guard. I could see him being an AHL player for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I can eventually see him cracking the lineup and being a contributor in that bottom six.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
And at 6'4" and 192 being very likely the lightest he's ever going to be, I think that'll be nice in the bottom six as
So
well. So.
yeah. So we're gonna whip through the last three really quickly because these are take a flyer and see what happens. Like this is way less than the
Take a flyer. I see
Yeah,
what you
I
did
know,
there.
pun intended, right? So Max Westergaard was one of their fifth round picks.
The smallest kid they drafted by far.
But some good offensive upside, by the way. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like some good offensive upside playing with, playing in Sweden.
Swedish juniors too,
Yeah.
right?
Swedish junior. Well, Swedish juniors where he had the most productivity. That's why I used that stat line because it was a little bit rough to sit there and go, yeah. By the way, you got 4 games in the SHL and you didn't really play to the numbers. Like I'm not writing down 4 games played, no points, no nothing. Like, no, the reason you got 4 games at in the Swedish Elite League at 5'11", 168, and not even 18 years old is because of those numbers. So there you go. And seems like a guy who's got a good motor on him. Seems like another guy with good upside. You never know. Maybe this is a diamond in the rough pick for them. You never know.
5th round pick guy coming out of Sweden. We expect it to take several years, but maybe he turns into something one day.
Exactly. Then we go to the next guy that they picked in the 5th round.
Let me try this one. You want
to try this one? Oh, this is a tongue twister for you. So good luck.
Vluswick?
Luke Vluswick. Yes.
Vluswick.
Yes. Now, by the way, I want to point out something right away. What's one thing you notice right away? He has a teammate.
That Red Deer's jersey is sick. Sorry.
Well, that is, but Red Deer, he's got a teammate who was drafted by the Flyers earlier in the day. So now they have 2 players on that Red Deer roster. And then you go and look at the other obvious part. Oh yeah, by the way, that one pick that was just made where the guy was 5'11" and barely 160.
We did it
or
for that
165.
right away.
Yeah, let's go right back to the here's a 6'4", 201 defenseman.
Yep. And again, we mentioned earlier the WHL, not the greatest scoring league, but they've put some pretty good defensemen in the NHL. So
yeah,
obviously this is a guy you're picking in the 5th round, so there's not an enormous amount of expectations as far as NHL contribution.
correct.
But still, a draft pick, a lottery pick as far as a lottery ticket goes. He's 6'4", 17 points in 68 games. So probably not going to be the most offensively minded, but we'll see what he turns into. If he, at very minimum, he'll be a good phantom.
Right. So next, this was the last one. Nathan Quinn, who is a center, another smaller guy, comes out of the Q instead of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Comes out of that league. Decent offensive numbers, but clearly one of these guys is going to be a work in progress.
6th round pick,
as 6th rounders are.
Yeah, a little bit on the smaller side. This is more of the Danny Briere mold, physically speaking. Obviously, maybe a little bit more of a project. This is the kind of guy, again, like I mentioned earlier, where you stash him away, you let him gather interest for 3 or 4 years, and then you check your account balance to see if it's worth withdrawing.
Right. So let's shift over. I guess we're going to shift over to free agency now, and we might as well kick it off with pretty much how quickly certain things came in right after 12 noon hit and everything was underway, right? Like it wasn't very long before you had a couple of things that was like, okay, they got this, and it was like the first hour and the day was over for the Flyers, right? So we'll start here.
The biggest deal of the day by far as actual kind of roster construction and what the 25-26 Philadelphia Flyers are going to look like, at least until the trade deadline. You pick up Christian Dvorak, who has a little bit of a suitcase. He's bounced around the league a little bit. He's 29 years old. You got him for 1 year. You're paying him $5.4 million, which was pretty funny because Elliot Friedman, the original tweet said $4.5 million. And a lot of people went, whoa, they're paying Christian Dvorak a lot. And then Elliot Friedman deleted that tweet and went, oops, I had those numbers backwards. It's actually $5.4 million. So Kevin, I think we both agree on this one here. It's a 1 year deal, so obviously the term's not going to hurt you.
Right.
It's a little bit more than you'd like to pay Christian Dvorak at this point in time, especially after 33 points in an 82 game season with the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
But It's flippable at the trade deadline. It's got, I said it in the group text, it's got 2.7 million retained for a second rounder written all over it.
Possibly. Important to point out right away, first of all, this is a former Rick Tocchet player. So like
Okay.
somebody who's had some good moments in his system before probably could be a fit. You're only talking about a bottom six kind of guy. It's not like it's
presumably you're bringing him in to help kind of install the system.
well,
Right? Like he knows what's expected under Torts.
You're also trying to figure out where you're plugging and playing certain guys, right? This is who's coming in after you traded Ryan Poehling.
Yes.
This is what you're doing. So look, I the more I've thought about it, because the price is high, but the more that I've thought about it, I think that this is the type of player who takes 2 years, 4 million AAV if you're giving him the second year, and when you went to the 1 year deal said, fine, this is my price though. And they were fine. Right. Like you're gonna have to pay me for taking a 1 year deal. And they did. And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't think he makes anywhere near $5 million if it's not a 1 year deal. If it's a 2 year deal, I think he goes down to 4, and and you kind of go from there. That's what it, like it is. Like the price is high, but it's also like I said, it's probably the cost of doing a short-term deal, and he gives you center depth. It might work out with the trade value. You might be able to you can retain at the deadline and not worry about it. So it's a perfectly fine deal. It's
absolutely. Like, and some of that is the price of being a bad team.
Right. And and that's my point. Like perfectly fine to me is it's not a giant needle mover, but it's also not like detrimental to your future.
Right. Like, do you think a team like Minnesota could have offered Dvorak 1 year at $4 million? Right, just to fill a spot, just to blah blah blah, get a guy, but he's going to take 1 year at 5.4 to come play in Philadelphia. Maybe you're a little bit of a hired mercenary. Maybe Danny Briere promised you he'd try to trade you to a cup contender.
Right. Well,
maybe both of those things are true.
And you know, as we go to the next player we're going to talk about, I think this is where this becomes important, because a lot of players were re-signing, a lot of players were staying put where they were, a lot of players were potentially taking less. Well, potentially taking less to do it. In the first year that in a long time where you can say caps up, there's a lot more space for people to use. You could be overpaying more guys, and instead a lot of people didn't. So let's go to this signing because
for example, Mitch Marner took a discount. He took $12 million a year to stay in Toronto, and then they traded him to Vegas. But anyway, yes, the other big signing out of the Flyers, and the one that has gotten more criticism, I'll say it, especially because of that second year, is the signing of Dan Vladar. And Dan Vladar is a name who's been around for a while. Quite frankly, he's been around long enough that the fact that he's 27 is kind of surprising to me. Honestly.
What did you think you were getting a 30-year-old?
I really thought I thought I've heard Dan Vladar's name for 4, 5, 6 years as kind of that 1B/2 kind of guy.
That's because you remember him being a Boston Bruin for a very brief period of time.
Yeah. And so the fact that he's 27, yes, I fully thought he was 31, 32. I really fully did. I thought we were signing Peter Mrazek part 2.
Now, do you know what's interesting to me about this one, by the way? Because yes, this was it's criticized, and maybe it does have to do with the 2-year thing. Okay, whatever. This improves your goaltending. I don't know where people out there get the impression that, because I've seen it floated around a little bit, the impression that you were supposed to go and get somebody better than Sam Ersson.
Right. Dan Vladar is at minimum the second best goalie on your roster, especially if Kolosov's not coming back, which at this point we assume he's
not. Better than him anyway, and he's better than Fedotov, so just start there. Like,
that's what I'm saying. He is clearing away your second best goaltender.
Like, I want you to think about something. If your answer to who's better or not, but if you answer the question, they needed to go get, like, if your statement is they needed to go get somebody better than Sam Ersson, that was what was going to improve the goaltending. Somebody who's going to start over Ersson, right? If the answer to that question was Jake Allen at 35 years old, who very clearly went into this for term and not money, that's why he re-signed with New Jersey. Like, do you think Jake Allen was taking $1.8 million to come to the Flyers?
Absolutely not.
Because you know why? Because they weren't looking at 5 years with anybody. They were going up to goalies and saying 1 to 2.
We got people in the pipeline. You're not going to have this net for long, but you can try to rent it for a year.
And here's the thing, like if your other answer to that, because this is the other name that was out there for a while, up pretty much right up until night before and day of free agency. If the other answer to the question is Thatcher Demko, do you even want to? I don't even want to know what the price was to trade for him, because I have a funny feeling that by the time you would have, given where that situation was, you're past the draft at that point for this year, so now you're up against free agency. I have a funny feeling that whatever you were given, whatever you needed to give Vancouver, started with 2026 and ended with first round pick.
Yeah.
Especially when they gave him $8.5 million on an extension as AAV. Like, clearly they still value him. So what do you think the trade market was for him? It was probably non-existent, because who was going to give Thatcher Demko that without having the track record of him playing for your team for his entire career? Who was going to give him that, knowing that he's possibly one injury away from being done? That's like, you can't take that risk on a guy like that, knowing that you have other things coming along and knowing that maybe something else happens along the way that allows you to, like, what if that conversation starts with the first round pick next year? And what if that pick turns out to be something that allows you to put the finishing touches on this thing? What if you're picking in the top 10 again by chance?
Well,
Something else goes wrong, so we don't know who, at that point in time, did you know any, like, it wasn't out there about the Tyson Forrester injury.
Well, and the thing about 2026 draft picks, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we've alluded to it a little earlier in the show, that's a Gavin McKenna ticket, man.
It is, but wait until and listen, once another year goes by and you're there, obviously you get to see how rankings change over the course of a year, because they will, no doubt about it. There are names behind McKenna that are really freaking good.
Really?
Yeah, and
but you know what I mean, though. Like, teams are skittish to give up first round picks in a year where the top guy is this good.
Yeah, the New York Rangers, who didn't want the 12th overall pick this year because it was either keep 12 and give Pittsburgh next year's first, or do it in reverse and give them this year's first.
Man, and you can't risk gifting the Pittsburgh Penguins another generational superstar. I don't think I can handle that. So sure. I'm really glad the Rangers took that.
But what I don't get about this is people act like I don't know what people don't want more of from Vladar. The numbers are actually above league average.
He played for a terrible Calgary Flames team.
Certainly offensively, they didn't score. Dustin Wolf had to stand on his head most nights to just keep him in the playoff race.
Yeah, that team was absolutely horrendous, and the fact that they were as close to the playoffs as they were is the reason that Dustin Wolf should have gotten Hart Trophy votes.
I just look at I feel like every time, and maybe this is just me, and this, we've been doing this long enough, this, I'm a little bit of a psychopath when it comes to this, that maybe I'm just watching more Calgary Flames games than other people are. To have seen that when he to have seen that when he plays, it's usually not as bad as what people were making it out to be.
No, it turned out the team was atrocious in front of him, and quite frankly, I wouldn't even necessarily expect his numbers to look that much better in Philadelphia with but when you take that over the numbers,
but when you take that over the numbers that Kolosov and Fedotov gave you, I mean,
exactly.
you take those numbers over what Erickson gave you by the end of the year, because that's the way it is.
When the bar is subterranean, I'll take an 898 all day long.
And not only that, but I hear you with it's the second year. It's the AAV's certainly a little high. Like this is a goalie that if I'm signing him for 2 years, I'm signing him 2 by 2.
Sure,
not 2 by 3.35. But
I think that's a little bit of that tax of the bad team.
It is. It's also an opportunity thing. This is like this. It's like with Fedotov. Fedotov probably thinks, at one point in time I was Russia's top goalie. I'm coming in here and stealing the show, and then it's not going that way. Maybe he's just looking for an opportunity and goes, okay, pay me a little bit more, and I want to come in and compete for your starting job.
All right, Dan Vladar, the first step is to go spend 18 months in the Arctic Circle. No, I'm joking. But yeah, so I don't even necessarily have a problem with the second year. I think that was what was the most criticized about it. I'm fine with it for 2 reasons. Well, a couple of reasons. The cap's going up. So that's 3.35 in a world where you're already not paying your goaltenders a whole lot of money, even with Fedotov's contract. Your goaltending's situation as a whole is still relatively manageable.
Yep.
Got 2 years out of a guy who's 27, so it's not like you're expecting the play to drop off. You expect those what is
Mm-hmm.
similar to those numbers that you see in the graphic here on our YouTube channel. If
Mm-hmm.
he puts up those numbers for back-to-back years, maybe with a slight improvement there, I am okay with this deal for Dan Vladar, given where this team is at right now,
Well, and guess
because
what?
you're going to need a better goalie in 2 years anyway.
Right, but think about it. Next year, like, because there's going to be a lot of hype about next year, they're going to have a lot of cap space.
A lot.
Do you know who the best two goalies on the market are, assuming that they make it to market in the first place?
Sergei Bobrovsky is one of them, isn't he?
Yeah, and you want to sign a
No.
36, 37-year-old to whatever he's going to want?
The uncles on Facebook would love it, though. Oh, God.
I'm sure, but you know what I mean. I'm saying you're going to
Yes.
sign that? Probably not. Do you know who the second guy is?
No.
Anthony Stolars.
Bring him back.
And he might be, he's better than he was when he left, but is he the solution? Or is the solution that you got to let Carson Bjarnason play in the minors for a little and you got to wait for Igor Zavragin to get here?
I think the answer could be both, honestly, because here's the thing. If
But
Anthony
that's it.
Stolars is 31.
Yeah.
So next summer, he'll be 32 signing a contract.
Mm-hmm.
If you sign him to a 4-year deal, maybe you have to give him a 5th year because it's free agency and that's how it works. Are you sad about that? With where the cap's going, if he's your number one for the first 2 or 3 years and then you transition over to whichever young kid is ready, like is that the worst thing?
I don't think it's the ideal scenario to immediately have to go out and get somebody who's in their 30s like that and that you've already been down that path with and who doesn't, again, has injury questions. Especially like they've made it abundantly clear that unless you're one of the guys next year and happen to make it, right now they're doing it. They're doing what they said, 1 to 2 year deals.
Absolutely.
Like
The
it's
plan is
stopgaps.
clear.
It's stopgaps for now, which brings us just to, and this is going to be super quick because we don't have a ton of information on these guys, the 2 defensemen that they signed, and that's where we'll kind of cap that for part of this. Actually, yeah, okay, yeah. Because I'm trying to figure out what other things we have on the docket. So there is one other signing we have on the docket that we want to get to. That's a lot more worthy of discussion. So
Yes.
right away, like let's just say Noah Juleson they signed, who's going to be a depth guy, probably basically almost essentially the Rasmus Ristolainen replacement right away.
Incredibly low risk ad at 900K for 1 year. Yeah.
And it's written out on the graphic. It's in the picture. What team did he play for last year?
Yeah, and that's interesting because so he played for the Vancouver Canucks last year. If you're not watching on our YouTube channel, and that's interesting because he played 35 games and had 0 points, which means
he's a defenseman.
To me, Rick Tocchet had to greenlight that guy. The stats didn't greenlight him. The blah blah blah. You signed Noah Juleson because Rick Tocchet said, "Hey, he'd be good to have in the room, or he'd be good to have around." Again, not necessarily to be a huge part of the roster,
sure,
but as a 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th defenseman, just in case type of situation.
Right, and that's what makes the next guy. It's a very similar situation.
All right, help me out because hockey's stupid. Is it Gilbert or Gilbert?
As far as I know, it's Gilbert.
Okay, because hockey has both.
I know. This is yes.
Dennis Gilbert, 29 points last year, or 29 games last year, 6 points. Split time between the Sabres and the Ottawa Senators. Very similar build to Juleson, similar contract, 25K less. Going to serve a very similar role. The Flyers have a bunch of defensive depth.
And I'm going to tell you, one of the 2 guys will not be on the roster on opening night probably. Or maybe they will be, but then you're going to have something else that needs to take, like there's other spots that'll still need to be filled. So
well, and that's interesting because when these 2 names were announced, I think one of the things that a lot of people jump to, your first thought wanders to, ooh, if they're adding this much depth as far as defensemen go, Cam York doesn't have a contract yet. What does that mean? Well, good news. We do also have the Cam York extension to discuss here, and there wasn't really anything else about Juleson and Gilbert. They're not going to play a whole lot of games. Cam York has signed an extension. 5 years, 5.15 million AAV.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you know who Cam York is. 17 points in 66 games last year, 77 points in 235 for his career. He's Cam York. He's going to be in your top 4. He'll spend some time on your top pair. He's Cam York. What do you have about this one, Kevin?
The fact that we need to figure out what he is under Rick Tocchet, because we know what he was under John Tortorella. That's important.
I agree.
To me, first of all, I was shocked that he got more than 3 years. I thought we were headed towards a 3-year bridge.
Me too.
I thought that even with a 3-year bridge, I thought we were starting like I thought this was going to be a really high AAV, and I kind of thought that in order to do anything else that they did in free agency, this needed to be done so that you knew what you had left toward the cap before you did anything else. So when numbers are coming in on July 1st and it's 5.4 for Dvorak, 3.35 for Vladar, it's like, oh, like what? And where does Cam York fit into all this? How are you going to do that?
Are they slotting Cam York into this, or are they starting with Cam York and slotting the other guys in? Like, how are they figuring this out? Right.
And I just didn't think there was any way, because I'm going, to me, the number that stood out in my mind constantly was 6.25. It was the Sanheim AAV.
Right.
Because what are we now? 3 years removed from that deal being signed? It's upwards of 3 or 4. It's right. Isn't that like equivalent anymore? Like,
well,
if Sanheim was up,
if
Sanheim was up for a contract today versus 3 years ago,
he's
when he
making
signed the extension, right? You're looking at 8.5, easy.
You gotta say,
I thought that York was going to shoot a lot higher, and you get him to, like, this is super comfortable, is it not? Like 5 years at 5.15.
You gotta say, I think John Tortorella saved the Flyers a lot of money here.
He probably did. I'm not going to deny that, but what I'm saying is that, like, I really don't know what's wrong. I brought this up when I was on OMB yesterday. You tell me which defenseman you would rather have, and you're gonna Cam York is gonna be one of them. But I'll just hit you with the other parts of it without saying his name in this case.
Yeah.
5-year deal, $5.15 million AAV, 24-year-old defenseman, offensive upside. That hasn't been tapped into yet, but offensive upside.
Yeah. I would say in today's NHL.
Okay, right.
That's defenseman.
Would you rather have that, or would you rather have 4 years, $4.5 million AAV, 31-year-old defenseman, big, physical, kind of, not known for the offensive side of the game? Would you rather have that?
Depends on where my team's at. I think both of those players have value at those numbers and in those roles. Typically, I would take the 24-year-old.
Right, because, okay, so this is the thing. I left you in the dark for a second on who it was, so that you don't know, because name recognition comes into play when you do that game. But sometimes you say a name and you go, no way, I wouldn't go near him. So would you rather have Cam York? You're right. Would you rather have Cam York, or would you rather have Cody Ceci?
Yeah, I think you might have been a little sweetheart on that Cody Ceci description, but okay.
Oh, of how I believe me.
The terminology you used was a little soft.
I mean, there's a lot to be desired from that, for sure. From his play.
Right.
I'm saying you're not going to get offense, and there's a lot left to be desired from the defensive side.
Right. Well, and here's one thing I want to say here: if John Tortorella did indeed save the Flyers some money here, if Cam York's AAV was upwards of 6, maybe a year and a half ago, then I give Danny Briere a lot of credit for getting 5 years. Because if it's a bridge deal and you save money for 2 or 3 years, cool, that's nice. That helps your franchise.
Yeah.
But this is the sort of deal where, like, if Cam York finds new gear under Rick Tocchet and elevates his game and becomes a true legitimate top pairing defenseman, even if he's not a number one, but if he's playing on the top pair pretty consistently, that's a sweetheart deal, man. 5.15 for 5 years is great, even if he ends up as a really good second pair guy.
Well, think about this. Do you know how many players they have under contract for next season? Like
I don't.
not 25, 26, but now we're going one more year,
26,
right?
27, right.
Konechny's obviously under contract, big extension. Sean Couturier is under contract. Owen Tippett's under contract. Noah Cates is now under contract. Tyson Forster is now under contract. Garnet Hathaway is under contract. Matvei Michkov will be in the last year of his ELC. This does not include, by the way, anybody else whose ELC decides to kick in this year. Could be
Martones, the whoever, Luchenko.
Porter Martone, Jet Lachenko, Alex Bump. Get ready to hear those names a ton as we get through the summer. You have Travis Sanheim under contract. You now have Cam York under contract. You have Rasmus Ristolainen under contract. You have Nick Seeler under contract. And you have Dan Vladar under contract.
That's a lot of security.
So I go through the list and I go, okay, a goalie, you need somebody else. Probably looking at where Sam Ersson is and then making a decision there. That's a simple thing. Among the defensemen, who needs a contract? Jamie Drysdale will, as an RFA, and your the anticipation is that works out because he's 23. Let's be real.
Right.
Igor Zamula needs a contract, but I wouldn't be so confident that that's a guy who necessarily is part of the picture. And at that point,
much more replaceable, especially with all these names coming up.
Okay, but do we assume Drysdale's part of that picture?
Absolutely.
Sure, and maybe Ristolainen's movable at that point. We don't know, but you have at least 4 guys that you know are going to be in it. Sanheim, York, Drysdale, and Seeler are all definitely probably locked in on that, right?
Yep. And you're hoping some of these younger kids come through eventually,
Sure.
and that fills out your top 6.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Then I go to the forwards: Konechny, Couturier, Tippett, Cates, Forster, Hathaway. We talked about a little bit about being maybe somebody who you think about moving at some point, but still, let's just humor it that he's on the roster even into the following season. Michkov. Let's say Bump makes it. Let's say Martone's ready by the time 26, 27 rolls around. Now I'm all of a sudden, Trevor Zegras would be due for a contract if he does what you hope he does.
Well, he's due for a contract anyway.
Right, but I'm saying you're going to make a decision based on whether or not you're going, well, and you're going to make a decision on whether or not you think he's part of that or not.
Fair.
Bobby Brink is going to need a new contract, assuming that he's part of the picture going forward as well at that point. You could potentially be looking at maybe minimally 10 forwards, 5 defensemen, and at least 1 goalie, maybe 2, that you feel like are all part of the picture, and just a small handful of them need contracts. And I go to the top of this list, and I find that particular year, oh yeah, look at that. They've got $41.4 million of cap space with all of that. And with all of that, and all I added in was Martone joins, Bump joins, they're all ELCs. So you're still going to have basically $40 million. And who's on the free agency list? And I'm not saying I'm not talking about just one guy, but it's like all of those names. You can step to the plate now, basically almost looking at your roster and going, 1 center, 1 defenseman. I got all this money to re-sign maybe like 3 or 4 guys that are going to need raises, but re-sign 3 or 4 guys.
And frankly, I'm hoping that Michkov eats a fat chunk of that.
Well, no, see, this is before it goes back up again, and Michkov still doesn't need a contract.
Oh, okay.
Because he still has that one final year. That's what I'm saying. You still have 1 more year of Michkov under $1 million.
Crazy.
That's why.
And that's if the cap only goes up at the minimum projections. There's rumors that it's going up even more.
I'm even just going off of the minimum. This is what I mean. You can step to the plate and basically sit there and go 1C, 1D. That's what we need. And everything else is internal. This guy needs to be here, right? Like, you want to come into the following season with Porter Martone needs to be here. Alex Bump needs to be here. Maybe you need another forward, and your answer is Denver Barkey needs to be here. I don't think it's going to be that soon, but like, let's just say, you want all of that to play itself out, and then I need 1 guy who I know is a stud defensively. Who is that guy? Because it's not Sanheim and everybody below it. You've got a great crop of 2 to 5. You need the one,
yep.
and you need the one at center also.
Oliver Bonk is the one.
Look, maybe it would be that way at some point.
Hopefully.
I don't think it's going to be, but that remains to be seen. you could go in and attack free agency. And because the one thing that I didn't like about the cap hits, the Dvorak cap hit and the Vladar cap hit was, okay, right now it was a 1-year deal and a 2-year deal. But what happens if when next offseason rolls around, you're banking on McDavid's a free agent, Kaprizov's a free agent, Eichel's a free agent, all these RFAs all over the place on top of that. And then everybody starts to fall off the board before you ever get to July 1st.
Yep.
What was the thing that it ultimately led to it eventually? But what was one of the things that also did Ron Hextall in? Everything was future, 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 future. And then you got to a free agent class that wasn't necessarily that great. And you went 5 years, $7 million per James and Riemsdyk. And it feels big because he's one of the biggest free agents on the market that year. But it didn't amount to what you wanted it to. Right. This is where you have to make it count. And can you imagine stepping to the plate with $40 million of cap space going into the offseason and maybe being able to get away with spending something along the lines of like 15 of it on what you have to do in-house and collectively, so that you can still step to the table with $25 million to just throw at 2 free agents?
Crazy.
Like,
yeah, there's definitely a plan in place. Like anybody who's watching
I'm telling you, I'm telling you, I know how much some of those guys are pipe dreams. There's at least a path to where you have the money for the pipe dream.
Absolutely. Like, okay, listen. Again, I'm not saying it's incredibly likely here, but is it completely impossible that Kirill Kaprizov wants to come play with Matvei Mishkov?
Oh, I don't think it's impossible that somebody wants to play with somebody who they might have familiarity with or know of their game. I don't think it's impossible. I was more or less talking about, now again, McDavid's a gigantic pipe dream in that situation, but if he ever made it to market, you tell me you're not prepared to step to the table and go $18 million. Right, $18 million. Go.
Whatever 20% of the salary cap is, go.
Seriously, go 18, 19, 20. It's almost like the bidding war is on, right?
Yeah, for as long as
I'll
you
go
want.
to 20, right.
Yeah, and I think Connor is still going to be able to sign an 8-year contract with the Oilers under the CBA. So,
yeah, because I don't know if I have to check and see if that kicks in with the offseason. I think you might be right, but I have to check.
So if it kicks in July 1st,
oh no,
he would have to sign before that anyway, because it's got to be
and he's got to
sign an 8-year deal. You have to sign it before July 1st.
And the fact of the matter is, if he signs in October, he signs before the CBA kicks in. So yes,
exactly.
So he does have the ability to go to an 8th year if he wants to,
and that's and it might be hard. It might be like a Mitch Marner sign and trade type of deal to get that 8th year for whatever team wants him. Like maybe that's where it ends up,
right? But either way, you get the
Connor McDavid sweepstakes is going to be crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So what else did we want? We hinted at the new CBA there. So there's a couple of wrinkles in there, like the max contract. Now, if you're a free agent within your own, or you're a free agent and you sign an extension with the team that you already play for, it's 7 years now, not 8.
And the max free agent UFA contract will be
6 years. Yeah, which I think it's just to open up more movement eventually, because it's
it's to save owners from themselves and bad contracts. It's the same reason the NBA.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the max in the NBA is like 4 years. Like it's crazy.
It might be 5, but yeah, I think it's something like that.
I think free agent it's 4. It's 5 has to be like team retain type stuff.
Oh, maybe it is then. Yeah. Like once you get the player, you can do a 5-year max deal. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm thinking of.
It's insane. And I think the NHL is heading in that direction. Obviously, we're trimming it.
There's a lot more contracts. The NHL would have a long way to catch up to the NBA in terms of the types of in terms of the types of trades that go down.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you see? Didn't I see there was one the other day where it was like 8 teams were involved?
I have no idea. The NBA
There's something
is
ridiculous. But anyway, the other kind of big piece of news that was in that new CBA is an 84-game schedule.
Yes, we are getting a couple of
reduced preseason. I think nobody's going to argue with that piece of it.
I think it makes so much sense.
Reduced preseason. Like,
yeah,
nobody's arguing with that. Like I know
the NFL did.
Oh, I know that, I'm so going to miss having to watch the 3rd home preseason game, which is like the 6th or 7th of the group. And it's just a total slog. Like nobody's there in the building. I can live with, like, we cap it at 4 and call it,
right. And have one real game. Like, let's be honest. There's
right
a couple of games that first week. And
we'll
then they
never
send all the Phantoms back to Lehigh Valley, and then
and
there's like 2 more games.
we'll never have to complain about like the lack of like how come they only play the Penguins 3 times in a year.
Exactly.
At least for now,
Rounding out
until
the
at least
divisional
until
schedule a little
expansion
bit.
hits again.
Well, they'll expand to 34. Yeah, it's gonna go crazy here over the next couple of years, but
And then there was a bunch of other stuff in it. Like there was the dress code thing that they don't have to have a dress code on game days like that. And I want to see how many people still stick to the way it just is because that's what they're used to.
I think you'd be surprised. I
Yeah,
think
I
there's
think so.
a lot of NHL players who
Oh.
are about to start showing some big personality.
You don't mean that like gee, I can't wait to see what Alex Ovechkin rolls up in the first game that he's on national TV, or Patrick Laine or Austin Matthews.
Over under.
Yeah.
If Ovi's in the league next year, because that's not a certainty, but if Ovi's in the league next year when the CBA goes into effect, over under games he shows up in a tracksuit, 74.5. Over.
For him, yes. See,
Yep.
I'm taking it to the like Patrick Laine is going to have some extravagant stuff.
That man's going crazy. Yeah.
I mean,
Subban might come out of retirement for a year just to dress up and show up.
I can see Matthews doing it. Like Matthews is a little bit extravagant with the way he dresses sometimes. I can see it. Anyway, there was that. There was I believe that I think it's a grandfathered rule, but they're going to start to do if you haven't played an NHL game by the time that CBA kicks in, you have to wear a neck guard. That's something I saw that was going to be in the CBA.
I was actually going to mention that because I noticed it on the Porter Martone picture that he had neck protection on, and
well, pretty much that was almost
in all the junior leagues,
right?
Absolutely.
That was pretty much effective immediately after that incident
and
happened.
I think it's a good thing for guys coming in to have to be wearing those. I think in 20 years we're going to look back on it a lot like helmets,
like the visor thing.
No, helmets.
Well, helmets, yes, but
I remember Craig McTavish whipping around with no bucket in like 2001.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm talking, but I'm also talking about when they made the visor thing a permanent. All the everybody who's new. How many guys do you see now?
3 guys in the NHL without it,
without a visor now. It might be
2 of them are close. And 2 of them are the Ben brothers.
There are also some that were like hardened to it and then still eventually caved because of one thing or another. Like I'm pretty sure Brent
turns
Burns
out you take a puck to the face. It's going to change your
I'm pretty
opinion.
sure Brent Burns was like that for a long time, that he didn't wear one and then started to.
Okay.
But anyway, stuff that we'll get all the details of everything that's in the CBA a lot.
Absolutely.
Later on, but it's
as we record here, we haven't gotten the official document yet. So.
You know what is interesting though, because I saw somebody make a joke kind of post that was something like, kids, this generation will never know the suffering that we went through, alluding to the 2004 lockout and the 13
2012 work stoppage,
which was interesting because I'm sitting here looking and go, every time I see something like this happen, it's like celebration, like labor peace. We love to see it. No stoppages here, because there is that element of being scarred by, well, remember 2004. Like
2004 was awful, man. I remember it was terrible. And then the PTSD flashbacks in 2012, there when that whole
before you got 48 games
breaking out. Oh, it was a nightmare.
Right. Nightmare. So every time this happens, I get excited about it because it means that you're not going to go through that process up against deadlines and things like that.
No hockey interruptions until at least 2029, 2030.
So do you want to hit this one more piece of news that came out today? Or was confirmed today? It came out yesterday, let's be real.
All right, which one was that?
This guy.
Gavin McKenna will be going to Penn State. We have alluded to it a couple of times throughout the program here. We're hopeful that Porter Martone joins him, because boy, that would be fun.
I think wouldn't it be something if he does? Now,
listen, I'm about 90 minutes away from Happy Valley, and I'm glowing if it's Porter Martone.
Now here's something funny, by the way, because I wrote the article on this, and I basically let in with, isn't it amazing what happens when you go to your first Frozen Four in program history right before this becomes a thing? CHL players being allowed to transfer over and
go make
pick a college program. Well, and And then all of a sudden, so you were in the Frozen Four last year, and you come through with Jackson Smith and now Gavin McKenna, and I'll throw in. I've been throwing this name out there as part of the discussion because there's a direct tie in a couple different ways. Luke Misa, who is Michael Misa's brother, also a teammate of Porter Martone's in Brampton,
right,
is also going to Penn State, and
and
start the recruiting process.
And by the way, if you're somehow listening to this show and don't know who Gavin McKenna is, remember how we've been talking all show about the WHL and how it's like not the highest scoring league and 33 points in 68 games actually isn't that bad. Okay,
not to this kid.
Gavin McKenna in 56 games, he had 88 assists. He also had 41 goals for 129 points in 56 games in the WHL.
At 17.
Hello.
In his draft -1 year.
Right. So in case you are wondering why NHL teams might be a little hesitant to give up 2026 first round picks, it's this guy. It's this guy right here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other guys too, obviously, but this is the guy. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see him in Happy Valley. I'm definitely going to do my best to make it over there for a game. If Porter Martone goes there too, I might have to go several times.
I just think it's incredible that like that was the feel good story as the college season was playing out. Like Penn State's still making it. They're making a run. They've gotten to the Frozen Four.
Incredible.
And you get this opportunity now. Like you just landed the golden ticket here.
Right. Yeah, this is the kid.
Right. And then you might end up with two guys who were drafted in the top 15 of the 25 draft as well, if Martone agrees to go, because you already got Jackson Smith.
Right. And by the way, rumors that McKenna, as far as his NIL deal, is making upwards of $500K and maybe as much as 700
was the number I saw floated.
Bananas. He's not that far off an ELC at that point. Like it's crazy. Like
that's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay.
But that's the thing, isn't it? This is the thing with this kid. Like you don't see this like first of all, if he just by going to the college game, you would think of the programs that he could pick. BU, BC, Minnesota, Michigan State,
elite top tier
Minnesota Duluth, Denver, like North Dakota. These places that have been always making runs at things, Yeah. No, Penn State.
We are.
And how far has that program come? And that's the thing. Like I said,
program like 3 years ago.
But this is the thing. And this is what I'm talking about. Like not only if Martone goes to pick a college, look, you can do worse than any of the places I just mentioned.
Of course.
Of course. You choose to go to Penn State if that's one of the options. And you play with this guy, and you play with one of your teammates from Brampton, and you play with a defenseman who went 14th overall, and you play with anybody else who's a carryover.
It's a wagon.
First of all, it's a great team. I would be absolutely all in on, like, you start to think about, like, okay, if Martone picked a college, like, would I have a problem if Porter Martone said, I'm going to Western Michigan? I'm going to go play for a year, let's say, under Pat Ferschweiler. I can live with that. If he says, I'm going to Denver, I'm going to play 1 year under David Carl.
Matt Carl.
Well, it's his brother.
I know.
Can you live with that? Can you live with that?
Happy with that. They're getting good instruction. Yeah.
It's getting to the point where it's time to put Guy Godowski's name in that conversation.
It's getting there fast, quick, and in a hurry. Absolutely.
But it's getting time to put, from a coaching perspective, they're a very well coached team.
Absolutely.
Which is why this happens. Like, you got to
that program has hit the gas pedal. It's crazy.
It has. It's insane. So that's where we were. I think that's almost every topic we had in the book, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to leave it, is on the 2025-2026 Penn State Nittany Lions.
I didn't think I was gonna ever have a Penn State graphic on here, but
No, like I said, man, they were a club team like 3 years ago. Like that program has gone absolutely bananas, and you love to say it. So, but all right, I think that is a good place to put a pin in this one. Man, if it's our last show before this little hiatus here, it was a long one, and I think we made it a good one. So,
yep.
if you agree with us, make sure to let us know on Twitter. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. It's the same for all social medias except for at Blue Sky, where he's just at Kevin Durso. You can find this show everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. Check us out on our YouTube channel. Like us over there. Like I said, we are hitting a little bit of a hiatus here, but I'm going to be around. But regardless what happens with the future of this show, the you would think brand is going to continue. I will continue making stuff whether you people want to hear it or not. And I really do appreciate. And listen, I am really incredibly knock on wood hoping that this is not the end of an era. But if it was, Kevin, I gotta say, man, it's been an absolute blast.
Well, you know what? I don't think that I would let it be the end of an era or anything like that.
Okay.
Like, not without doing one more at some point, probably. Like, just to,
You heard it
we'll
here, folks. He said it
see.
on the air.
Well, we'll just like we'll see what happens. I don't really know. There's just certain things, you know. Let's say I hope I don't have to explain any of it.
Absolutely.
Honestly,
I firmly hope that we are back at the start of training camp because things are hunky dory and we're all running smooth. I promise.
and listen,
Yeah.
okay, before anybody asks or goes crazy, if you've made it this far, by the way,
Yeah,
it's
of
not
course. Thanks for
no,
listening if you have.
it's not family related. It's not something
No,
like that. So so don't
everybody's okay.
right.
Life
Don't
just
assume the
kind of
worst there. It's not one of these types of things. It's just
life is lifing.
right, exactly. And
And we'll
like I said, I hope I never have to explain and get
absolutely.
to a certain point, and we just
And
move forward with this thing again whenever the time may be.
I hope we are back in the fall with regular weekly episodes like you've grown accustomed to here on this channel. If we're not, I will be back in some form or fashion, whether it's podcasts or videos or live streams, or I'm going to do something. We're not done here. So make sure you're
Mhm.
following us on social media. Follow Kevin too. Get the show everywhere you find your podcast. Make sure you're subscribed so that when we come back, you're here first. Um, Shoot us a tweet, send us a message, talk to us. Let us know what you liked about the show, what you didn't like, what we can do moving forward. As I mentioned off the top here, if you want to do some content, send me a message. The Twitter DMs are open. I am down to getting stuff done and doing a little experimenting on the social media here. So that's going to do it for this chapter of You Would Think. Regardless of where we go in the future, this is the end of the 2024-2025 season. If we do come back, we will be looking forward. The Flyers are theoretically on their way up. There's a championship coming, man, within the next 5 years. I feel it. And that's a great note to go out on because I've always been the number one fan on this show. So I'm going to leave it there. Um, Thank you again for everything, Kevin. It's been a great season. And
Yeah.
until next time, we'll see you.